I think that we certainly are moving in that direction of being more space booking focused of let's get you to the office
Yeah.
so you can be in the company of others, but not necessarily be confined to one space. And I think that's the beauty of remote first or flexible working is that you kind of have the ability to move around and not feel as confined.
Hey everybody, welcome to Leading from Afar, a podcast by remote leaders for remote leaders, aimed at sharing knowledge and experience to help make remote awesome within your companies. I'm Scott Markovitz. I was the first hire at Envision and helped build the foundations of the company, from marketing, sales, product, operations, and pretty much everything between. I've also mentored and consulted with hundreds of early stage startups, including a bunch of remote ones. Each episode, we'll speak about hot topics, trends, and the future of remote work. We'll also interview some super smart leaders at all levels of remote teams and introduce you to new tools that can help you succeed as a remote leader.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to today's show of Leading from Afar. I'm your captain, Scott Markovitz. Today, I got to chat with Danielle Farage, who runs growth and marketing for a startup based out of Paris called Café. So Café is building an app to help better organize hybrid remote, allowing companies to better understand utilization of their spaces, as well as providing insight into when and where people will be working to better help plan employee engagement events. It also provides employees the insight to who will be at the office and when, so giving them the insight into when to plan to come into the office. In the episode today, we spoke about why many companies are choosing hybrid over fully remote. We broke down what companies versus their employees are most interested in with hybrid remote. And we also spoke about how important community will be to making hybrid remote successful. So here we go. Hey, Danielle, thank you for joining us today. How are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
All is well. Welcome back. I know we spoke offline. You were in, I think, France for a couple of weeks and now back in New York. How was the trip?
It was fantastic. I got to meet my whole team for the first time, which was very exciting, and got to spend some time, frolicking around Paris. It's a fun time.
Very nice. Certainly one of the added benefits of remote working. I spoke yesterday, I recorded an episode with Jing, and she spoke about you quite a bit. So once that episode goes live, you'll hear your name quite a few times. And congratulations on becoming an admin in the future of work community. And I certainly know how much you speak about the future of work on social media. So it's awesome to get more involved and spread the goodness of remote work and the future of work.
Yeah, for sure. There's just so many projects going on and brilliant minds jumping into this side of things. And I've been in HR tech for about a year and a half, and I've really seen the progression of things happen, and it's just a really exciting time to be in the industry. So I'm excited to just bring people together and highlight, those awesome projects.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's something that we spoke about with Jing, and also I've been talking about it quite a bit on social media of, one thing that now, hopefully as the pandemic is moving along, the tools that are coming out are being built by long-time remote workers for long-time remote workers. All the tools that got us, I've been working remotely for 10 years, the Zooms and the Slacks and all the tools that were used all these years by remote teams were never designed for remote work, but it just happened to be the only tools that were available at the time. And it's great to see now a lot of old timers now building tools for the future of work to make it the way that it's supposed to be, especially I think on the engagement side, on the HR side. So yeah, it's fantastic to see.
And community-led growth as well.
Sure.
So that's exciting. We'll probably talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. So the getting kind of start off question, again, the part of our new format for this week, totally different topic, something that I read. Somebody posted on social media, I forgot who it was. It's something that we spoke about on a podcast episode last year. But your thoughts on the idea of taking sick time when working from home. Are people really doing it? Your thoughts. I'll share my thoughts afterwards.
Yeah. So I think people are doing it less. I think I read the same article or something similar to you. Yeah. So people are taking fewer sick days. And I think part of the reason is that there is more of a work-life integration than a work-life balance these days. And so, just yesterday I wasn't feeling too great. I tuned into sort of this growth marketing summit. And that was my work day. And I said to my boss, I'm not feeling the best today. And he said, take it easy. So I think it's just, and I didn't take a sick day, but it was more just, it was a learning day for me. So it was great. And I super duper encourage the same trends and all that. I think more of a work-life integration is gonna happen.
I completely agree with that. I think the future is one of the things that really hit me, especially recently with all the different conversations of all these different areas around the future of work and issues in America with logistics and getting truck drivers and all that, is I think we're really at the cusp of finally moving from the old adage of you living to work and finally moving into the working to live, which I think is obviously probably 100 plus years overdue. And it's fantastic to see that now people are changing their lives. They're living their life during the day, doing the things that they want to do, spending time with the people that they want to do, and encompassing, incorporating work into that, we'll call life schedule, versus the other way around of incorporating, trying to find the lifetime in between the work time. So it's fantastic to see. But as the sick thing, I've always felt it's your home. So it's easy enough to work from the bed. You have access to your tea or medicine or things like that. So the fact that you're not having to go 60 minutes, commute into an office out in maybe not pleasant weather, the fact that you may not feel so good, so you're in an uncomfortable environment in the office, the fact that you're home in a more comfortable environment, you have all those things, kind of gives you that push to, okay, let me keep working, because again, I can just work from the bed. If I need some medicine, I can just go to the cabin and I can just make a cup of tea. I can take a nap, right? If I really don't feel good, I just kind of put my head down for 2 hours and I come back, versus, okay, I got to take the entire day off because I'm commuting probably an hour each way and then the rest of the day is shot.
Right. And it's interesting because I just wrote an article about desk booking versus space booking. And it seems very product focused, but it's actually not. It's more of a conversation around if you have the job and the task of booking a desk on a day-to-day and you take up space in the office, then you feel like you're maybe taking away from other people. So when you're sick, or you're not feeling that great, you're probably more likely to stay home, when in reality, maybe the medicine you actually needed was the comfort of other people. And, I think that we certainly are moving in that direction of being more space booking focused, of let's get you to the office so you can be in the company of others, but not necessarily be confined to one space. And I think that's the beauty of remote first or flexible working, is that you kind of have the ability to move around and not feel as confined to one place or feel like you're taking away from anyone else.
Interesting. I think that's a great segue to get the conversation started. So usually each episode starts with just telling a little bit more about yourself and a little bit about the origin story of Café.
Yeah, for sure. So I am originally from New York. I grew up in Manhattan. It was very interesting. I went to a Jewish private school in New York. It was called Abraham Joshua Heschel School. So Abraham Joshua Heschel was actually a huge part of the civil rights movement. There are multiple photos of him and Martin Luther King Jr. being, arm in arm marching. And he was a huge thought leader and really advocated for painting your life as if it were a work of art, and things like radical amazement, just being, just mystified every day by what's around you, and practicing gratitude was always part of my education, my 15 years there. And the other part was really just asking questions, thinking critically. And so I carried that with me to college, where I went to USC, went out to LA, studied psychology with this general understanding and insight as, 76% of people who go to college don't actually study or do what they study. And so I said to myself, what can I do to apply and make the most out of my time here? So I attended, hundreds of events on campus. I was always super active in clubs and political and social and religious. And I essentially found my way to marketing. I was really interested in the intersection of business and psychology. And I also saw this problem in the world that I really wanted to help fix, which was that a lot of people in boardrooms making decisions about people weren't necessarily well versed in the psychological, background of how people make decisions. And so I thought, I want to be the most well versed in people and be able to make the most informed decisions, whether I'm leading a room or I'm, sitting in a room. And so I studied psychology with that understanding that was the problem that I really wanted to solve. And I ended up working in the HR tech space at an AI company fixing hiring. And it was really, really interesting. That's where I got my start with community management. And I had like some other things in college that I did that were community focused as well and leadership focused. But I got the chance to essentially put on these conferences, virtual conferences during the pandemic. So all of, the rest of 2020 and 2021, we were throwing conferences focused on the intersection of automation and human process, and essentially with an HR tech focus. So how can we make hiring better? How can we make employee engagement more personalized, onboarding more efficient with the help of automation? And then we also produced a podcast. And that was really where I got my start with community. And so the way that I got to Café was the company I worked at got acquired, and I thought it was kind of my time to go and try something new. So Café team reached out to me and actually offered me a job. And so essentially what I loved about the product and what sold me was it was extremely employee centric. Everything had to do with, we felt this pain and we want to bring, efficiency and a better experience to other people. And essentially Café was founded by two brothers who have a really strong background in mobile consumer applications. They have built several apps that have had like millions of downloads. It's their first company together. They actually just joined the last YC batch in the summer, and things have been really, really great so far. So I'm excited. Awesome. The rest of the team is actually in Paris, so that's why I ended up going out there.
Very nice. Very nice. Your opinion, your thoughts on why companies are really going to a hybrid. I'm extremely, extremely opinionated on this, but want to get your 2 cents, especially building a product for this.
So I think there's generally just still a need for in-office life, realistically, if we're thinking about the employee-centric approach. I think for most organizations, the office was where culture happened. It was where people ran into each other. And so switching to full remote would be a huge adjustment, not just for people, but also for the leaders. And I think you can't really do that overnight and have it be sustainable. And we're seeing the impact of that from just witnessing the great reshuffling, right? People had problems that they didn't feel that they could voice their opinions about, and things probably didn't get better from there. So I think that a lot of companies, leaders specifically, have sort of maybe a control problem and don't want to give up full control. There isn't enough established trust in order to go fully remote and for leaders to be comfortable with that. And there's also not a lot of leaders and managers who have experience, managing a fully remote team. And so that's actually one of the most sought after, skills in today's age and on the market. But, I think generally we have an opportunity. It's a huge opportunity to not only study what people want and totally rethink, right, our strategies around remote or hybrid or in office, but use people's insights to craft everyone's favorite blend for hybrid work, which is like what Café really empowers, which I love. And it's all about finding the right balance for employees with a more informed and constructive approach coming from leadership. And you really just need the right tools to do that.
Yeah, I could probably spend a whole episode arguing about the point of the office creates the culture. For me, I completely disagree with that point. It's the people. The whole idea of the ping pong table and the beers and whatever it is was great for, at least in my opinion, for the young professionals, 20s, who their whole social being, and I was certainly there, and I've certainly felt this, that their whole social being was work.
So the option really was at 6 o'clock, do I go home to an empty apartment and be by myself, or do I sit around and hang out with people there and drink a beer and play ping pong? But once you get married, you have kids, you move out to the suburbs, then the last thing you want to do is be in the office. You have no interest in the beer. You have no interest in the ping pong table. You want to get the hell out of the office as early as possible to get home and spend time with your family and your kids and doing things in your community and so on and so forth. But that's, right, I think, a whole nother debate there. But I think the one point that you brought up, which is, I think, for me, one of the three key pieces of why companies are going hybrid, it's that there's no upskilling. All these organizations kind of took what they did in the office and just did the same thing remotely. And, across all the episodes of this show, the one word that comes up more than anything else is intentionality. For a remote organization, you need that intentionality. And I can't blame the companies for not doing that, because what did they know? And this is certainly the basis of how this podcast started earlier this year was, I certainly think for the next 18 to 24 months, there's nothing more important than giving this experience and this knowledge for someone, at least myself, who's has built and led remote companies and remote teams for 10 years. My previous co-host last year had the same, and just to share our experiences here. When you want to give constructive feedback, what's the right way? What's the wrong way? Why? How do you engage people? How do you do events? How do you do these things? Just to be able to share that experience with managers who are now in position of having to lead teams remotely who have no idea what they're doing. And yeah, I think this is definitely the most crucial part. I think it was companies looking at that investment. Do we spend the time and money to upskill our managers to really, which for me, I think we'll get into it, whether you're hybrid, you're fully remote, every company moving forward has to run and operate on a remote first basis. So communication, engagement, all those pieces has to be with that remote first mentality. And the tools, the tools just weren't implemented. I had a whole thing about the tools before that, again, as we started, the tools for engagement in conversation and culture have never been there. They've been there for work. The Envisions, the Basecamps, the Trellos have been there for years, even allowing people to work kind of remotely when they're sitting next to each other in a conference room or in the office. But sorry for ranting on. I don't want to keep going on this rant.
Kind of going in like a million directions as you're speaking.
Yeah, kind of to pull out a point that you brought before about the optimal hybrid setup. What do you really see is that this is the ultimate, I want to call it the ultimate or the only real opportunity for hybrid to be successful?
Yeah, I think the optimal hybrid setup is one that's super flexible and really one that's based off of not the culture that currently exists, but the culture that you want to create and the culture that you want to attract people to, right? And
sure.
It requires constant iteration and constant reconsideration and reevaluation with employees hand in hand with employers and leaders. So, I think for me, the best hybrid setup, without taking into consideration my current setup, like in a perfect world, if I were at a bigger company, and I would probably want to be, working 2 days in the office and have it be, on 1 week, if I don't feel like going to the office, then I don't. And on another week, if I feel like going to Europe and working from Europe for 3 months and backpacking, then I can also do that. So that's for me, I do want that in-person communication. I'm also a Gen Zer. So a lot of the things that I go on podcasts to talk about actually are debunking and demystifying Gen Z in the workplace. And essentially what that means is, I've actually never worked in a traditional office setting. And I think that's extremely unique, but it's also the experience of many people my age and even a year below me. So I think with that, I'm kind of starving for, or was starving for this in office and in-person interaction. And going back to your point earlier about, the ping pong tables and millennials wanting to hang out after work, like I never had that. So I do want the, that social, connection. I don't have a world of people, in my professional social life. And I think that's the same for a lot of people my age. But, I am filling that void in other ways, going to networking events, kind of like what I did in college, involving myself in a bunch of different worlds, including the future of work community on Upstream, and just sort of making the most of being alone, I think.
It's an interesting point. I think we'll want to try to dig into it a little bit later and pull out some questions first about the idea of the future is the community, and maybe especially for Gen Zers, is the community really going to be, and I know there's quite a few influencers in the remote future workspace that said, the future of community is going to be local community. You're working from a local place and you're building relationships and community where you live, and you're not really focused, and kind of that idea of building the relationships in that community in the office or work is kind of gone. So it's interesting, and we'll kind of go into that. But to pull back to your idea of the ultimate idea of hybrid, I think we're in complete agreement that it's really flexibility for your choice. You're the one who chooses it. So this week I want to be in the office 2 days. Next week I don't want to be. Next week, follow after that, I want to go to Europe. It's giving the flexibility for the employee themselves to choose versus the company going, okay, the 3-2 model. And again, we'll probably talk about that as well. But kind of pulling off to another question, from the companies who are using Café so far, what have you been seeing from the company executive side, or that are companies really looking to get into in regards to hybrid? Is it keeping that central headquarters where people can come into however often they want? Are they moving more towards a hub and spoke model? I know Standard Chartered Bank in England I think was very famous for this, getting rid of their central headquarters and getting a relationship with Regis and getting local co-working spaces so they can work wherever they want. Or it's kind of the third model of some of these companies that we've also had on the show, like Kettle Space, where you can kind of book a space at a hotel lobby or a cafe or a restaurant or a bar, kind of these undervalued, underused spaces. What are you seeing so far from the people that you're speaking to of what is their interest? What does that office look like in a hybrid model?
Yeah. So it definitely ranges, but mostly I would say that our clients are very aligned with the remote first idea. I think it is getting a little bit harder to maintain that approach because a lot of leaders just don't understand it yet. They're not comfortable with the idea and of relinquishing control and putting trust in employees, which is a sad reality, but it is a reality that we have to work with.
That's the truth.
And yeah, and it's a progression, nothing good ever comes super quick. Everything good happens with time. And actually I wrote a post today on LinkedIn about sort of this, personally, I used to be the special kid. I needed more time to really process my thoughts and read and comprehend. And I used to think that was a really bad thing. But in reality, now that I look back and now here I am today, a talented writer, and I love reading and writing. So it's kind of everything good really does happen with time, and slow is okay. And slow actually makes you stronger. So when we've talked to our clients about sort of they have held out and kept the flexibility. And a lot of companies in the States as well have also kept the flexibility and are just attracting talent. They're attracting talent from the companies that are saying, hey, you have to come back to the office these 3 days a week. And I'm sure we'll talk more about the 3-2 model, but I think that the more innovative companies, certainly a lot of our clients are looking to open hubs based on employee data. So let's say you're, a cafe admin, you'll find that your remote employees in Chicago have been meeting up at one of their houses or a local coffee shop in the city. The HQ is maybe in New York, but these people in Chicago all happen to live within, 2 miles from a co-working space. So you decide to get them all passes to a WeWork or, open a hub nearby in Chicago or right outside of it. So I think that a lot of our clients who have maintained maybe the HQ, but have created it into more of a, come as you'd like, office as a perk mentality, are really seeing the benefits. And then using Café, they can really encourage the sort of spontaneous and, by chance interactions, but also for, I think, depending on what your priorities are. So younger employees can really use Café as a targeted approach to who do I want to build relationships with in the office, onboarding as well, making people feel more like they belong, inviting them in on the days where there's a lot of people in the office. There's a lot of different use cases for how we're seeing our our clients use the product.
Interesting. So it sounds like hopefully the companies are slowly moving in the right direction, at least my 2 cents. From the employee side, for the people actually in the community of those companies, and probably from people you've spoken to in the Upwork, my future of work community, and obviously in social media, what do you feel is from the individual side? Is there interest in a hybrid, for the hybrid model to go to a central place? Is it go to more local, single place, like a single co-working space that everyone's at? Or is it just the model of, hey, I decide where I want to work from in the morning over here, morning in the afternoon over there? What are you seeing?
So I think definitely we do have some data, which I can share with you on that exact thing. So essentially, this was taken in September, so a couple months ago, but a lot of the companies that we survey are in Europe. So keep in mind that Europe, and specifically like France, Australia, like they've had the return to office like happening for the past year. So like a lot of these companies have been back to office for like a year and a half even. So like we essentially have this mindset and like frame of here's like a year into the future. And like that's why I think we sort of have this advantage where we can share this data. So essentially it's like, keep in mind, full remote means like less than 10 days in the office, like over 2 weeks. So like one day in 10 days in the office. And so we have like 16% of people want full in office. 30% want remote first, which is basically 1 to 3.5 days out of 10 in the office. And then 36% want hybrid, which is 7 out of 10 days in the office. And then 16% want full in office, which is obviously office first, which is like more than 7 out of 10 days. So based on that, we can say that 66% of people want hybrid. And that means that we definitely do need to like cater to the needs of employees. We need that in-office space, right? At least most of the companies that we work with. And I think it is sort of like a comfort in a way. Like I've found that when you don't have an office at all, or somewhere where you offer people to gather, there's sort of this lack of, okay, well, then how do I find people to hang out with? And like, how do I make this really into a part of my life and a part of my social life? So I think on the part of employees, I would say like Cafe really helps with helping you understand like who's around you and what events there are, and trying to find sort of this spontaneous approach to creating the hybrid life that you really want for yourself.
Interesting. To now kind of get more into the 3-2 model that we kind of hinted at a couple times. I know there's lots of debates and there's been lots of back and forth of the 3-2 model. Is it who's deciding? Is the company deciding Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or whatever the day's schedule is? Is it potentially going to be the individual teams themselves? Maybe something like an Amazon is going to look to do, or is it going to be in the flexibility of the employee themselves, giving them decide, hey, you in theory, you have to come to the office 3 days a week, but we'll allow you to choose those days. So for the product, Cafe, we're trying to give you that insight into who's in the office and when and things like that. Potentially in the case, maybe less likely of the company sets, okay, here's everyone in the entire company is working in these few days, which to me I don't think is really realistic. And I think we've seen that from Apple and Facebook and Google and all those have tried that and they had revolts on their hand. But in theory, how can companies really engage their team and do that team building when in reality, there's never going to always be everyone on campus on the same day? You may, again, try to force a portion of the people, but there's always guaranteed, it's never going to happen that you're going to get everyone back on campus on the same day. So what do you think about that? And how can Cafe really help companies with those areas?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll preface this by saying that, Cafe has been tackling hybrid for a year and a half. And so these same trends that we have seen with our European companies will present themselves in the States. And so one of the major problems that we did have and saw is that the 3-2 required office model is, people could go to the office, 2 people could go to the office and never meet each other, which can lead to a second-class citizen problem, right? So where you have someone getting more face time than another person with certain leaders and they're promoted faster, and the person at home, are working on different days, gets promoted fewer times. And that could potentially be women or the primary caregiver in the family. It's likely to be. So the solution is give employees the power to choose when to go in based on what everyone else is doing, right? Empower them with the visibility into what's going on in the office to find their favorite blend or their best blend for hybrid work. Allow them to assess their own priorities in their own lives and have more of this work-life integration, right, that we were talking about earlier, and enable and empower them with those tools to help them do that and accomplish the goals that they want to accomplish and develop the relationships and go to the events and stay home with your kids, right? And I think that's a huge one. The other problem that we saw was a lack of flexibility. So with this 3-2 model, like I actually posted a meme the other day about someone saying to their manager, yeah, I can't come in on Friday. Like I have to pick up my kid from school. And the manager says, oh yeah, that's fine, but not Friday. Can you find a replacement parent? And it just sort of illustrated this lack of understanding and, the importance of keeping that flexibility of like, hybrid is actually flexible. Like hybrid means remote first. And I think that, with Café, the beauty of it is that we didn't even set out to really help or have a product that touched remote employees. It was more, you only pay for people who go to the office. But we started seeing that the remote employees, because they could see like on a map, who's working around them, it's all self-reporting. They could essentially say, hey, like, I see that you're nearby. Like, do you want to go to a WeWork or do you want to go to this cafe or do you want to come over? And I think that the beauty of Café is that it's turned into sort of this remote first product out of not, it wasn't even, we didn't even mean for it to be, but because we do like more space optimization, we do have this like social flavor that is attached to that and that we've seen really can change a culture and can change and perfect, in a sense, the employee experience in a hybrid environment.
Yeah, interesting. I like the last point. When we're looking on the Café site, was looking at that opportunity for to see obviously how much space is being used and space utilization. And for me, again, being very negative on hybrid to begin with in the office to begin with, getting that mental model of, okay, here's executives and finance teams looking, okay, here's the power of the product. Let's see how much usage is being used. So if we're seeing, okay, it's only 50% used, then, hey, let's cut the office down in half. Let's downgrade and downsize our office. And that's really the value proposition. It's really that the data point of how much space should we be using? How much space do we need? But I think that you kind of open the bigger opportunity. And I would love to hear more of maybe how companies are using it more, is really that opportunity for engagement to say, okay, well, we have 30 people that are planning to come on next Wednesday to use the space. Hey, maybe that's a great opportunity to do some kind of event or a fun thing at the office because we know a whole chunk of people are going to be there. Or even trying to plan like the events and build that engagement around that, saying, hey, okay, on this Friday or whatever it is, we want to try to do this event and see also how much engagement it is. You're thinking, okay, we're going to get a lot of people coming in for this event, but if it doesn't happen that way, then maybe it obviously hopefully crafts the types of events and engagement you do forward. Now, what are companies, I guess, mostly, are they using it for one case versus more, or do you even see that engagement piece being really the biggest opportunity for Café moving forward, and certainly for teams that be looking to use Café?
Yeah, I think engagement is a huge one. I think even, I think that a lot of companies are seeing the challenge of if you plan an event on a day, you think they'll come, but in reality, it never actually happens, right?
Doesn't
like,
work that
and
way.
I think, and like that's the power of like community. I think as it relates to sort of the office, if you create like micro communities, there's a bigger chance that those communities will show up on those days where you have events and the people that they actually care about are going in. Not that they don't care about everyone, but let's real talk. People want to come into the office and they want their time to be utilized wisely. They want to know that they're going to get something out of being in the office, that something's in it for them. And I think that that's what companies struggle with the most is proving that, because, in 2019, looking back on that, you don't really think, oh, there's a huge reason for me to go to the office every day, and I really want to go back to that. Like, no one is really saying that. Very few people are saying that. So I think that that's, the huge opportunity is really to bring people together for these events. I think the biggest challenge workplace people face is actually forecasting and optimizing space. So that's really what we do, but with a social flavor. So I think the real benefit for employees is making the office fun again, being able to choose when you go to work, depending on what other people are doing, what your priorities are, personal and professional. And really that is aligned with the employee-centric or personalized approach that gets people to stay. And everyone is talking about retention right now. So like yesterday in the Future of Work community on Upstream, we had William Tincup, and he said that the number one challenge for the next 5 to 10 years will be retention. And guess what? Engagement drives retention. So if you can see where people are gathering, not only can you design the best office, but you can craft the best experience of remote or in-person or hybrid, a combination of the two. So we really do, we try to help companies build lively and thriving hybrid workplaces by giving their teams new ways to meet with their peers, right? Whether you're in the office or you're outside of it, you'll know there's someone that is willing to meet with me on, for the next 10 days. And we help managers specifically build a space offering that everyone respects, because it is shared and it's open. And we basically help people come together, and we bring people together and make sure that everyone gets a space to spend the day at, and a group to spend the day with, and that their time is really utilized wisely.
Kind of a great segue into the last question that I have. We started the conversation earlier with that idea. Again, a number of people and influencers in the space have spoken about the future of community being local community and not work community. In theory, for the ideal picture of hybrid, again, it's very flexible to the individual, which then may mean, again, there might not be as much overlap. It may be more difficult to do engagement events and fun events at those spaces because some people come, some people don't come. They RSVP, they don't show up. What do you see from a company side of how they may be looking at the future and building community? Should they really continue putting like all that effort into building that community within the organization, building that relationship with colleagues? Or should they potentially be looking at, again, maybe people in supporting people building those connections in the community wherever they live and not necessarily in the office? And are they potentially fearful of that? If you're working in some random co-working space and you're working around other entrepreneurs or people, are they afraid, hey, you may make good friends over there and all of a sudden you're going to leave? Because you're not connected into that company community. What do you think?
I think that's a really real fear of people leaving, but people will leave at the end of the day. So you can't stop that from happening, but you can certainly help them feel more empowered in their everyday and engaged so that they don't leave. And you can hope for that. But I think really to answer your question, I just wrote an article and I'm working on actually a bigger one where the one that I just wrote, it's called Cryptos to Corporate Lessons in Community. And I make the case, and don't hate me for this, but I do make the case that in order to strengthen and really solidify bonds of community, you have to have the in-person interaction. Not to say that everyone has to go to the same place, but fostering those connections in person really does change the game. Sure. It helps people feel more connected. And so essentially, as NFT NYC just happened in New York, I was like, why is this happening? Why are people flying out from all over the world to meet these communities? And why are these communities hosting huge, crazy parties? I mean, people were out all night in New York. Like, it's never looked like it has the past week. But, I say that to say, I think there's a lot that we can learn from different industries, specifically the NFT and crypto space, on how they've built their products around community. Most projects in the NFT world didn't even launch without establishing a community first. And I think organizations have never really been established that way. Like it's always just been, here's an idea and we're going to hire people to help solve this problem. And I actually think at my last job at Wade and Wendy, they did a really good job of tying back the work to the mission of the company. And I think the same thing with Cafe, like I felt more connected and aligned with work. And that's what gets me motivated at the end of the day and gets me excited to engage in more communities and foster it.
Nice.
So I think really the two biggest blocks and are for community are level. So the fact that not everyone is on the same level in organizations, I think that's starting to change actually. And it really is. I think the most innovative organizations no longer sort of think about this hierarchical structure, but they think of it as more skills based and, needs based. You fill a specific need and maybe on a specific project. Like I think agencies have sort of developed this new model of, we just got a new client. What are the skills we can pull from the people that we already have to bring them onto this project to really accomplish the goal? I think that, fractional hiring is going to be a huge one. And then, that certainly, and then the other blocker is really, I would say space, being in the same, not the same space necessarily, but like having a central location where all communication happens. And that really just requires communicating. And I know several really great companies that do this. 10 Spot is one that comes to mind specifically, where it's like, we all have user manuals on how to use products, how to do everything, right? How to lift weights, but we don't have a user guide on how to communicate and how each person wants to communicate. So I think developing more structure and process around that, and then also giving people the right tools to really connect with their communities. One of the features we just dropped was favorites. And so you can essentially put together a list of like your favorite people, and everyone can utilize that differently, right? You could put your mentors in your favorites if that's a priority for you. You can put your best friends or whatnot. And then the other one was open for a drink. So like you can essentially on any given day indicate whether you're open for a drink. And like, I think that's just like a cool feature for socializing purposes and to make people feel included and like they actually have people to go get drinks with.
Yeah, interesting. I like that. All right, so we're going to go now into the final section of the 5 rapid fire questions. So again, just throw out the answer that comes to the top of your head. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, question number 1. Who is a remote leader that you look up to and why?
Nellie Hayat is a remote first leader that I really look up to. She is incredible. She incorporates ideas from Judaism and from like the changing of the seasons and nature into really designing workplaces that people thrive in.
Very cool. Number 2, what's your go-to source for tips, tricks, and ideas on how to do remote the right way?
I like that. I read a lot of Harvard Business Review, and I also go on Clubhouse a lot. So Frances Fry, she is at Harvard. They do a weekly Harvard Business Review sort of session where they unpack an article from the previous week. And it's a really fun time.
Interesting. If one of the companies that was previously hybrid comes to you and says, hey, we want to go all in on being a totally remote first company, what would be the first change that you would suggest that they do to embrace remote work?
I would say developing a more efficient communication plan. So understanding where things are going to happen by actually surveying employees and understanding like how they communicate best and would like to communicate. So really having more of a employee-centric mindset as you develop your remote first strategy.
It's a big question, at least that's come up for me recently, of that idea of feedback. Companies have spent millions and millions of dollars and for years have desperately tried to get that feedback from employees. They got a crystal clear picture from the past 2 years that every employee pretty much is expecting flexibility, whether that's full-time remote, whether that's hybrid, whatever it may be. Yet you still see so many of these debates and arguments about, again, whether it's 3-2 or pushing people back into the office. And I think we certainly saw that from the Future Forum report that came out. I don't know if you got a chance to read it, but like the Grand Canyon size gap between how executives are thinking and how the actual employees are thinking. So it's wondering if that feedback really makes enough of an impact to get people over maybe own personal biases or whatever it may be to say, oh, okay, people like to talk in this way. They don't want to ever be bothered after this at this type of time. Is the opportunity really there to make that impact, or is it just going to be something similar to like the remote where everybody wants the flexibility and companies are saying, I don't really want to give you the flexibility?
I think there's certainly an opportunity to involve employees like they never have been involved. It's also, I think one of the stats that I saw was 68% of employers reported involving their employees in the conversation, or maybe it was not involving them. I can't exactly remember the stat, but it was like something overwhelmingly upsetting to me. I was like, there's a lot of room to grow there in terms of like some companies just aren't even asking their employees what they think. And I just think that's crazy. Like there's, if you see the trends in the news, right? Oh, most people want hybrid. The last thing you should do is take flexibility away from them, because that's just going to be counter to everything that everyone else is doing. And you're just going to lose people. And that's what we're seeing. Like all these fast growing companies are just retaining and attracting talent because they just give flexibility. And like, that's as simple as it is from the outside. But I think that there's a huge opportunity to just rethink the way that we've built things and built companies. And I think the fast growing companies that we work with specifically are seeing a lot of benefit from just having, an office as a perk mentality.
Exactly.
And they're seeing people really, really be receptive to that. So I'm very bullish on the hybrid. I think it's going to be the new normal for sure.
Interesting. Question number 4, what's one thing that lots of people or lots of companies get wrong with the idea of remote work?
That people aren't going to do their jobs.
Is it still possible these days? I mean, all the data is there. I mean, it's so clear that people are minimally as productive as they were in the office, or in many cases more productive. Is it even possible these days for them to really still think, oh no, people can't do the job as well at home or wherever they want to be as in the office?
I think it's possible. I think we're seeing people say that.
That's very sad. So that probably kind of, I guess, answers the last question. Is the age of being required to go into the office truly over?
No, not yet. I mean, it's truly over in terms of in a number of years, the companies that require people to go back to the office, most of them won't be able to retain people.
Yep.
I think people are going to make the best decision for them. I think the future to me looks like some organizations really embracing the office first life, like really. And that will be for the people, for the 16% or whatever percent it is who want the office first lifestyle. Like I think people are going to find the right culture for them, but it will take a lot of reshuffling of the cards in terms of people, but also reshuffling in terms of, and redefining what hybrid means to each company to really find the right thing. And that right thing might change from time to time. So I think, but I think that it just requires a constant conversation. Hybrid is a slow burn. It's a slow burn, but it will totally pay off. But I'm curious from your perspective, what does the future of culture and the future of hybrid and remote work look like for you?
Yeah, I think the future of hybrid will go through multiple iterations. We'll eventually end up on that idea of, as you said before, that the office is a perk. It's here. If you want it, how you want it, why you want it, when you want it, it's up to you. You want it 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, fantastic. You want it once every 2 weeks to come and and have coffees with the people who are there, to go to lunch with your colleagues, and then go home to actually do the work, that's fantastic as well. So I see that's the finish line, but the ultimate, or will end up after multiple iterations of whether it's the forced 3-2 hybrid model, whether it's everyone on the same days, then moving to multiple days, then spoke, maybe moving to a more spoke model instead of having to go on a 60-minute commute to get into that office. Because that's the biggest thing, right? You could say 2 days, 3 days. Nobody wants that 60-minute commute. I commuted 70, 80 minutes each way from Long Island down to the Wall Street area, and it was absolutely miserable. So getting past that, eventually to that point that you want to use it, use it. You don't want to use it, that's great. That's great as well. And for the engagement, it's really going to be, and I think this is the issue with many of the companies that are doing hybrid now, it's redesigning and recreating all those office moments, all those office cultural pieces for a remote first mentality. How you communicate, how you get those little serendipitous moments, how you do team fun. For years, remote companies have used video in the wrong way. What do remote companies use video for? For meetings, one-on-one, all hands, team meetings. And that's why you hear about Zoom fatigue, or one of the reasons. Well, again, all those ideas could be, you could just replace this into a long form document or an email. But companies haven't been using, okay, let's get, instead of the 40-minute team meeting, why don't we get 45 minutes of team fun? Let's play a game. Let's do Pictionary. Let's do trivia. Let's do some type of thing. Let's do a Netflix party or whatever it is. Let's use video for that relationship building and that connection, the interaction. So I certainly think companies will eventually end up in that direction because they're going to be forced to do that. And yeah, that's, I think, my view of the future. But people who want to get in touch with you, learn more about Café, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so usually LinkedIn. I am on there quite often. I'm actually a LinkedIn creator, which happened quite recently. So I am at Danielle Farage on LinkedIn. And then on Twitter, I am at Hybrid Futurist. And what else? I do have a website, so you can go there, daniellefarage.com. And then to learn more about Cafe, actually, we have you can download it for 50 users for free at .cafe. So.
Awesome. So we'll include all that information in the show notes and on the posts, so everyone can get a hold of that and all the kind of other information that we mentioned before. And Danielle, thank you so much for joining and having the conversation about where hybrid is going and how they can use Cafe to best support their team in hybrid work. And until next time, everyone, have a great day.
Thanks again, everybody, for tuning into today's episode of Leading from Afar. If you enjoyed the podcast, you can learn more on our website, leadingfromafar.com. and subscribe to the podcast in your favorite app. This podcast is all about you, the remote leaders. We'd love to hear from you with your feedback or ideas for future topics and remote leaders we should be speaking with.